The horse came back at dawn, dust-caked, eyes wide, reins trailing like broken ropes behind it. No rider, no sound but the creak of leather and the heavy, uneven clop of hooves on dry earth. It wandered into the yard slow, as if uncertain it was welcome, though it had been born in that very barn. Tom Calder stood barefoot in the doorway, boots dangling from 2 fingers, still chewing the last bite of cold biscuit from breakfast. He saw the horse, and something in his chest went still. That horse didn't come back on its own. It was trained too well for that. He stepped down, called its name low and steady. Brisket. The gelding stopped, head jerking toward the voice, ears twitching. When Tom reached it, he saw the dried blood on the stirrup leather. Not much, just enough to change everything. Brisket was Ellis Gray's horse, and Ellis hadn't planned to be gone more than a morning. He'd ridden out the day before to check fence lines east of Dry Needle Ridge. Carried a bedroll, his Winchester, a half jug of water. No reason to go far. And now the horse was back without him. Tom ran a hand down Brisket's neck. The gelding flinched, but didn't shy. Its flanks trembled like it had run too hard for too long. Tom walked him to the trough, let him drink, then stripped off the saddle. That's when he noticed the saddlebag. One side hung open. The other was buttoned tight. He unlatched the closed flap, reached inside. Felt paper. A folded envelope, thick, sealed with wax. No name. He didn't open it, just stood there, fingers tightening around it like it might bite. Ellis, he said quietly, as if the name might conjure the man from thin air. Nothing answered but wind and the far-off caw of a raven. He tucked the letter into his coat and looked toward the horizon. Dry Needle Ridge cut the sky like a scar. He'd have to go. If Ellis had fallen, or been shot, or worse, someone had to bring him home. Tom packed light, a canteen, some jerky, his revolver. Left a note pinned to the barn door in case anyone came looking. Then he saddled Brisket again. The horse didn't want to go, but Tom whispered to him, firm and soft, and they headed east. The trail out of town was dry as bone and just as pale. Not many folks lived out that way. Too rocky for crops, too far from water. But Ellis knew the land, and he'd ridden it before. Tom didn't talk much on the ride, but his mind did. Rolled through every bad possibility like a gambler counting debts. Snakebite, bandits, a fall. Or maybe Ellis just left. But no, he wouldn't leave Brisket, and not that saddlebag. By noon, heat shimmered off the rocks like glass. Brisket's ears flicked constantly, catching sounds Tom couldn't hear. They passed a dead coyote near the old split-cedar marker, shot clean through, not recent. When they reached the first ridge, Tom dismounted and looked for signs. He found them. Scuffed dirt, boot prints, a broken branch. Blood. It led off the trail into a cut between 2 stones, narrow and steep. Tom tied Brisket to a scrub tree and followed the path on foot. The further he went, the quieter it got. Even the wind held its breath. If you've made it this far, drop a comment below and tell us where in the world you're watching from. We love seeing how far the frontier reaches. Tom moved deeper into the canyon, where the path narrowed and the rocks closed in tight enough to scrape the sides of his boots. Dry branches clawed at his sleeves, and loose stones rolled beneath his heels. The sun was fading behind the ridgeline, casting long shadows that made everything feel just a little more uncertain. Then he saw it, half buried in dust near a scrub of mesquite, a torn scrap of fabric, red and gray flannel. He dismounted and picked it up. Dried blood stiffened at the seams. It matched the shirt Ellis had been wearing. That changed everything. He scanned the trail and noticed hoofprints, fresher than Brisket's and larger. Too large for a single rider. There had been another horse here, and it had followed Ellis. The spacing of the prints said enough. It wasn't a companion. It was a tail. And whoever it was, they weren't in a hurry. The canyon opened into a sunken clearing, quiet, hidden, the kind of place you wouldn't find unless you were trying to disappear. That's when Tom saw him. Sprawled in the dirt near the shade of a sandstone outcrop lay Ellis Gray. His body looked like it had been folded wrong, collapsed forward with one arm stretched toward something just out of reach. A dark stain had spread beneath him, already drying at the edges. Tom dropped to his knees and rolled Ellis onto his back. The man's face was pale, lips cracked, shirt soaked through with blood near the lower ribs. The bullet hadn't exited. It was still in there, somewhere deep. "Ellis," Tom said, voice hoarse, "you hear me?" No answer, then barely a twitch. The man's eyelids fluttered open and a whisper escaped. "Tom." "I'm here," he said, cradling the back of Ellis's head. "Just hold on." Ellis tried to say more, but only fragments came. He pointed toward a saddlebag nearby, his fingers weak. "Letter." Tom nodded. "I have it, right here." That seemed to settle him. Ellis blinked once more, then closed his eyes. His chest lifted shallow, then went still. Tom sat there, unmoving. The canyon was silent. Not a bird call, not a breeze, just the finality of it. He stayed long enough to gather stones and build a crude cairn, covered Ellis with his own coat, said no words, just stacked each rock with the weight of memory and guilt pressing down behind it. By the time he mounted up again, the sun had dipped low enough to cast the canyon in rust. Brisket walked slow, sure-footed. No one passed. No one called out. When Tom returned to the ranch, it was full dark. He unsaddled the horse, gave it a rub down, then stepped into the barn and sat by the lantern with the letter in hand. He broke the wax seal and unfolded it. It wasn't addressed to him. The name was Hannah, a girl. Someone Ellis had written to more than once. There were mentions of previous letters, of promises, of danger. What stood out most wasn't the romance or fear. It was the sense of urgency, a warning, a secret passed down, one that someone clearly hadn't wanted delivered. And that meant someone out there still didn't know it had made it this far. The sound of hammering echoed through the hills that morning. Wes had taken the saddle into the barn, laid it on the work table, and begun the slow process of cleaning and oiling the leather. He wasn't sure what he expected to find, but something told him not to leave it out in the elements another night. There was something strange about the way the stitching looked near the candle. Older, faded, like it had been redone in a hurry. By mid-morning he'd peeled back one of the seams. That's when he found it. A folded scrap of parchment tucked deep beneath the leather, dry but stained. Wes unfolded it with care, breath held as the creases gave way. It wasn't a letter, no names, no greeting. Just a map, rough, sketched by hand. Landmarks only someone from around here would recognize. The twin mesas, the Bone Ridge, and a mark near the dry creek bed just east of Crow's Bluff. A red X. It didn't make sense. Why hide a map inside the saddle? Unless someone had been trying to keep it from being found, or from being followed. Wes stared at the paper for a long time before folding it back up and sliding it into his coat pocket. He looked out toward the hills beyond his barn, to where the ridgeline dipped and the sky met stone. The same wind that had carried the horse home now pressed at the barn walls like it was waiting for him to move. He saddled his own mare, packed some jerky in a canteen, and set out toward the bluffs. The ride was slow, not because the trail was hard, he knew it by heart, but because the weight in his chest had grown heavier with every mile. He didn't know whose blood that was on the saddle, didn't know what the map meant, but he knew one thing for sure: someone didn't want it found. The bluffs loomed ahead by early afternoon, sharp against the pale sky. Wes dismounted near the creek bed and tied his mare to an old snag. He pulled out the map again, checked the landmarks, then started walking. The red X was near a cluster of cottonwoods. He found them quick enough, and then he saw it. Not a grave, not quite. More like a shallow depression in the earth, disturbed recently. Brush had been laid over it badly. Wes crouched, reached out, and brushed aside the dry branches. What he found beneath made his blood run cold. A second saddle, same make, same stitching. But this one was torn, stained darker. Next to it, a set of boots, small, child-sized. He stood slowly, heart pounding. This wasn't just about a rider lost on the trail. This was about someone hiding something, maybe someone running. And if the boots meant what he thought they did, then the person who rode that horse home wasn't riding alone. He turned toward the trail, eyes scanning the hills. And that's when he saw it. Movement along the ridgeline. Too far to make out a face. But the silhouette was clear. A rider watching. Not approaching. Just there. Wes didn't wave, didn't shout. He just stood there, hands at his sides, and waited. But the rider didn't move. After a moment, the silhouette turned and vanished over the ridge, like mist dissolving into stone. Wes let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. The wind picked up again, and behind him, the mare stamped and snorted like she'd seen a ghost. Wes rode home slower that evening. The wind had shifted by late afternoon, colder now, dry and sharp, the kind that came before weather turned. He kept scanning the ridgelines, glancing back every so often. But there was nothing out there, just fading sun and silent grass. He reached the ranch just as dusk tipped into darkness, unsaddled the mare, brushed her down, and laid the second saddle, the one he'd found, on the workbench beside the old one. Two almost identical builds, except this new one had a mark carved into the leather near the horn. L.H. West frowned. He didn't know anyone with those initials, not local anyway, not in the last 10 years. He lit a lantern, its glow casting soft yellow across the bench. As he moved the saddle, something shifted beneath the flap. Paper. He pulled it out slowly. A photograph, black and white, faded. A woman and a child standing in front of a small clapboard house, hills behind them. The boy was about 6, maybe 7. Same face from the saddle mirror, same boots. Wes stared at it for a long time. He didn't know them. But the house, that style was familiar. Mining cabins, North Hills, from back when silver still drew men west. Most of those towns were ghost bones now. He set the photo next to the map and studied both. The boy must have been trying to find this place, or run from it. Wes locked up the barn, crossed the yard to the house, and bolted the front door. Inside, he poured a drink and sat at the table, the photo between his hands. Whatever had happened out there wasn't finished, and that horse hadn't wandered back by chance. By first light, Wes was gone. He didn't leave a note, didn't say where he was headed, just saddled up, strapped his bedroll, and rode north, past Crow's Bluff, through dry creek beds and over sun-bleached ridges. By midday, he found the house. It looked just like the one in the photograph. Same porch, same slope of roof. Except now it leaned like it had forgotten how to stand upright. No smoke, no sound. He tied off the horse and stepped onto the porch. The boards creaked loud in the silence. Inside, the air was stale, and dust coated everything. But near the stove, he saw signs of recent use. A tin can, still warm with soot. And on the floor, small footprints. He followed them to the back room, and there, curled in the corner under a threadbare quilt, was the boy. Same face, same eyes, alive, but barely. Wes knelt, slow and careful. "It's all right," he said. "I ain't here to hurt you." The boy didn't answer, just stared at him. Not like he was scared of Wes, more like he was scared of whoever might be following behind. Wes pulled out a canteen and held it forward. The boy drank. And somewhere, outside, a branch snapped. Or maybe a boot step. Wes stood slowly. He wasn't alone. Wes moved to the front of the house, one hand resting on the revolver at his hip. The sun was up now, but the light hadn't yet burned off the night's tension. His boots crunched across the brittle porch boards as he stepped into the yard. The air smelled dry, metallic, like the moments before a storm or a bloodletting. Then he saw them. 2 riders. One tall, lean man on a black horse with eyes that looked like glass. The other was broader, older, face half hidden behind a scarf stained with red clay. Both sat still in their saddles, no rifles raised, no hands moving. But Wes didn't need motion to sense the danger. It clung to them like dust. "You're far from your line," Wes called out. The tall one leaned forward just slightly. "We're looking for a boy," he said. "Don't suppose you've seen one?" Wes didn't answer. Not right away. He stood square, weight even, fingers relaxed, but ready. The wind cut across the open plain, rattling the old corral behind the house. "You lose your own?" Wes asked. The older man chuckled. "No, just settling a debt." Wes didn't blink. "He ain't here." "That's so?" The tall one dismounted, slow, deliberate. Not a challenge, not yet, but a threat folded neat into a motion. Wes stepped off the porch. He didn't draw, not yet. But his hand hovered close. Inside, the boy was peeking through the window. Wes could feel his eyes, the weight of them, and knew he had to hold steady. Had to make sure the kid saw something worth trusting. The tall man took a step closer. "We don't want trouble," he said. "Then ride on," Wes replied. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut clean. A long pause. Then the broad man spoke again. "You think you're protecting him from something, rancher, but you don't know what that boy's brought with him." Wes let the silence stretch. Then, "Don't matter, he's here now, and he's under my roof." Another pause, then both men turned without another word, mounted up, and rode off. No hurry, no glance back, like they knew something would bring them here again. When they disappeared over the ridge, Wes exhaled, slow, controlled. He stepped back inside. The boy was still at the window, breath fogging the glass. "They're gone," Wes said. But the boy didn't move. His eyes stayed fixed on that empty patch of horizon, like he expected it to fill again. "They'll come back," he whispered. Wes nodded once. "Then we'll be ready." That night, the wind came back, harder this time. It slammed against the barn like it wanted in. Wes lit 2 lanterns and bolted the doors, double-checking the latch on the window above the cot. The boy, he hadn't said another word since the riders left. Just sat by the stove with his knees pulled up, eyes wide and restless, like he could see something in the fire that Wes couldn't. Wes didn't push him. He just kept busy. Watered the horse, checked the traps, made stew out of dried beans and salt pork. He set a bowl in front of the boy. The kid didn't touch it at first. Then slowly, spoon by spoon, he ate. "You know who they are?" Wes asked quietly, sitting across from him. The boy nodded once. "They took my brother." Wes waited, giving the silence room. The boy's hands were tight around the spoon. "They came to the village last spring," he said, voice like dry paper. "Said they were government men. Said they'd teach us, feed us, make us better." Wes felt something sink in his gut. "They took all the boys, anyone over 10. Said it was the law." "And you?" Wes asked. "I was 9. A flicker of something crossed the boy's face. "But I followed, after dark. Found them 3 days later. Only my brother was gone. And the others." He didn't finish. Didn't have to. "They saw me," he added. "I ran, kept running." Wes leaned back in the chair. The lantern's glow flickered across his boots, the walls, the scarred edge of the table. "You don't gotta run now," he said. The boy looked at him. Not disbelief, not quite, but something close to hope, like it had been buried and now was peeking out of the dirt, wondering if it was safe to grow. Wes stood, pulled a blanket from the shelf, and handed it to him. "Get some rest. I'll keep watch." The boy hesitated, then laid down. Wes took his seat by the door, rifle across his knees. Outside, the wind howled, but in here, the fire held. Later, maybe an hour before dawn, Wes heard the horses again, not galloping, not charging, just waiting. And something told him the real trouble hadn't started yet. At first light, Wes stepped out of the barn with his rifle slung low. The wind had eased, but the air still felt sharp, like it hadn't forgiven the night. Tracks in the frost led out across the flats, horse prints deep and slow-moving. Not from the boy, not from the marshal either. These were fresh, organized. He counted at least a dozen riders, maybe more. Inside, the boy was awake, fully dressed, sitting on the edge of the cot like he knew something was coming. "How many?" he asked. Wes didn't lie. "Enough." The boy nodded, jaw tight. Wes poured 2 mugs of coffee, passed one over, then crouched beside the stove. "They're not here for a chat. You and I both know that." The boy didn't answer, just stared into the coals. "You said they took your brother. Did they give him a name?" The boy's voice came low. The red one, red coat, red horse, called himself Bishop. Wes froze. He knew that name, not from the papers, from the war, from whispers. A man who used faith like a hammer and saw sin in anything different from himself. A man who believed salvation came through control and wasn't afraid to draw blood for it. The marshal hadn't said it outright, but Wes understood now. This wasn't just about a missing rider. This was about what that rider carried, and the men behind him. Wes looked at the saddle again. The canvas flap beneath the seat was torn. Something had been stitched in there once, a pouch maybe, or a message. He checked it again, carefully this time, and there it was, a thin, stained envelope tucked deep in the lining, nearly missed. He slid it free. The seal was broken, the paper worn. Inside, a single sheet. Names, dozens of them. Locations, ages, tribes, children, a list. The boy saw it too. His hands shook. "They kept records?" he asked, voice thin. Wes nodded. "And now someone doesn't want those records to see daylight." He folded the paper and slipped it into his coat. "You're not giving it to them, are you?" Wes stood. "No. I'm giving it to someone who'll burn down a courthouse if that's what it takes to stop this." The boy rose too. Smaller than Wes, but he looked older now. Not just because of what he'd seen, but because of what he was willing to stand for. "We leave at night," Wes said. "If we ride hard, we can make it past the river by dawn. After that, they won't follow." "Why not?" Wes gave a faint smile. "Because I know what they're afraid of. Same thing all cowards fear. Truth with a voice." The boy didn't smile, but his chin lifted. Wes tightened the cinch on his horse, double-checked the rifle's chamber, and looked out over the flat land. He had ridden this country alone for years. Not anymore. They rode under the cover of dark, hooves muffled by damp ground and soft frost. The boy kept pace, silent, his breath visible in short bursts. Wes led, eyes sharp, scanning the hills for movement. The wind had settled, but the silence was heavier now, like the land itself held its breath. They avoided the road, skirting low through the hollows and dry creek beds. Twice Wes spotted movement up on the ridgeline, shadows on horseback, moving slow, watching. Not pursuing yet, just herding, waiting for a mistake. At the river they stopped. The current ran cold and black under a pale moon. Wes dismounted, led his horse to the shallows, and motioned for the boy to follow. They crossed single file, water lapping at the leather cinches and boots. When they emerged on the far bank, the boy was shivering. Wes handed him a blanket. "Dry your boots. We rest for an hour. No fire." The boy nodded, teeth clenched. Wes crouched beside him. "You did good back there. Quiet, focused. That matters." The boy stared at the ground. "I don't want to be brave," he muttered. "I just want it to stop." Wes didn't answer right away. He remembered saying something nearly identical once. Different war, different place, same ache. "I know," he finally said, "but sometimes stopping it means being the only one left who doesn't run." The boy met his eyes. There was no fear now, just a deep, tired understanding. Wes opened the saddlebag and removed the envelope again. He studied the list by moonlight. Names of children, whole families, places that didn't exist anymore except as scars on the map. He thought of the marshal, of the fire in his voice, of the threats left hanging in the air. They won't stop. not unless someone forces them to. He folded the paper again and tucked it into the lining of his coat near his heart. They rode again before dawn. The sky paled in strips behind them, casting long shadows eastward. They'd cleared the worst of it. No more riders in sight. No tracks following. But the threat still lingered, like a fever not yet broken. By mid-morning they reached an outpost, just a shack, really, but it had a telegraph line and a nameplate nailed above the door. West dismounted and handed the boy the reins. "Wait here." Inside he sent a single message, to a judge he trusted, one who'd fought beside him once, one who owed him more than a favor. He wrote, "Found something, big, names, dates, truth. Coming west. Burn the trail behind me." Then he signed it. W. Calder outside. The boy sat quiet in the saddle. "Who'd you send it to?" he asked. "Someone with louder boots than mine." The boy smiled for the first time since they met. Small, but real. They rode on, west, not running, not hiding, just moving forward, with the weight of history in a saddlebag and the first taste of justice riding beside them. The terrain grew harsher as they rode west, rockier, steeper, the kind of land that didn't forgive mistakes. West knew these hills. He'd once driven cattle through here when the only danger had been snakes and sudden storms. Now, the threat wore spurs and rode in silence. They stopped near midday at an abandoned relay station. The roof had collapsed on one side, but the stone walls still stood. Wes led the boy inside, checked the corners, then cleared space near a broken hearth. "Eat," he said, tossing him a wrapped hunk of bread and jerky. The boy sat on a crate and chewed without a word. Wes crouched by the hearth, studying ashes years cold. His mind wasn't on the fire, though. It was on what came next. They were 3 days from the border. The judge would need time to act. Time they didn't have. Outside, a raven called, just once. Then silence again. Wes rose and stepped into the light. Tracks, fresh. Only one horse, but heavy, deliberate. They'd been followed. He went back in, packed fast. "We move now." The boy didn't question it. He stood, slung the saddlebag over one shoulder, and followed. They rode hard for an hour, pushing through thickets and along narrow ledges. Wes took them off the trail completely, down into a gully choked with thorns and dry brush. When they finally stopped, both horses lathered and breathing hard, Wes motioned for quiet. They waited. Minutes passed. Then came the sound. Hooves, deliberate, slow. One rider, just like before, but close. Wes drew his rifle. He looked at the boy. "Down, stay still." He moved uphill, careful not to snap twigs, and found cover behind a boulder. From there he saw the rider, Marshal Fallon. Alone. Wes cursed under his breath. He should have known the man wouldn't send others. He'd come himself for the satisfaction. The marshal stopped near the relay station ruins. He dismounted, walked in a circle, then knelt. Wes knew that stance, tracking. Fallon stood slowly, scanned the horizon, and looked straight toward Wes' hiding place. Not directly, but close enough. The marshal raised his voice. "You can run, Calder, but I'll keep coming. Not for the boy, for the ledger." Wes didn't respond, didn't move. "You think names mean justice? Out here, they only mean more graves." The marshal waited a beat, then turned and mounted again. He didn't ride off, he waited. Down below, the boy shifted. A rock rolled underfoot. The sound echoed sharp across the gully. Fallon's head snapped toward it. Wes didn't hesitate. One shot. The marshal dropped from the saddle. The horse bolted. Wes stood over the body a minute later, rifle still raised. Fallon lay still, not dead, but bleeding. Wes looked down at him. "You followed the wrong man." The marshal smiled, blood on his teeth. "We'll see." Wes walked away. He didn't kill him, but he didn't help him either. They rode west again, this time faster. Time was no longer on their side. But maybe, just maybe, truth was. They crossed the last ridgeline just after dusk, the sun falling fast behind jagged hills, casting long shadows across the basin below. In the distance, flickering lamps marked the edge of a settlement. 3 buildings, maybe 4, too small to call a town, too stubborn to vanish. Wes stopped the horses and dismounted. He didn't say anything, just stared at the valley like it might answer a question he hadn't asked out loud. The boy followed suit, hands stuffed into his coat, eyes wary. "That's where the judge's man is," Wes said. "The one waiting for the ledger." The boy nodded. "We go in?" Wes hesitated. It had started simple, protect the child, expose the names. But somewhere along the trail, it had become more. The ledger wasn't just evidence, it was a reckoning. And reckonings didn't come clean. "You wait here," he said finally. "If I'm not back by sunup, right east. Stick to the creek beds. Don't stop." The boy frowned. "You'll come back." Wes didn't respond. He walked the last stretch alone. The building was an old saloon, half sunken and boarded on one side. A single lantern burned in the window. Wes pushed through the door, boots echoing on warped floorboards. One man sat at the table, gray coat, thin hands, no badge, but too still to be anything but law. Wes tossed the ledger on the table. "There." The man didn't touch it. "Fallon?" "Still breathing, for now." The man nodded once. "You'll need to testify." Wes gave a cold smile. "You think a jury'll believe me? If they see the names inside, they won't have to." A pause. "You did right, Calder." Wes looked away. "Don't know if that matters anymore." He turned and walked out. The boy was waiting near the ridge, horse ready. They rode all night, didn't speak, didn't look back. By dawn, they'd passed the edge of the territory, where roads gave up and maps turned vague. A place for starting over, if such places still existed. Wes stopped the horses and looked out across the plain. "Where now?" the boy asked. Wes shrugged. "Where no one's watching." The boy smiled faintly. Together, they rode into the morning. No badge, no name, no past they hadn't earned. Just sky, earth, and whatever came next. So what did this story mean to you? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to tell us where in the world you're listening from. Thanks for spending time with us, out here in the Silent West Stories.